administration in coming weeks. You probably already are. But the question is, and it's worth considering, is Kamala Harris actually a moderate? Well, let's see. Here she is last year calling for Congress to change the Constitution of the United States so that 16-year-olds can vote. As you watch it, for the sake of argument, pretend that Harris means what she's saying. And then ask yourself, what kind of person could make an argument like that in public without blushing? Only someone who'd never actually met a 16-year-old.
Do you believe that Americans should have the right to vote at age 16?
I'm really interested in having that conversation. I have to tell you that. I think that there is no question that if we are looking at what is going on in our country, we are putting more responsibilities on people at a younger age, and the larger number of people that we can involve in the electoral process, I think the more robust it would be.
There is no question, Harris says, that turning the government over to 10th graders would make the country more robust. For sure. No more school, free dab pens for everyone, endless possibilities for more robustness. Does Harris really believe that? A few years ago, she had this assessment of young people. Watch.
We mold and shape and direct someone to become a productive adult. What's the other thing we know about this population? And it's a specific phase of life. Remember, age is more than a chronological fact. What else do we know about this population, 18 through 24? They are stupid.
She's right about that. So put together her two statements on this subject. Young people are stupid, and that's why we need more of them to vote. And it makes sense, in fact. When the entire electorate is as passive as Joe Biden has become, you can pretty much do what you want. You can wield total control. That's what Harris is arguing. Say what you will about that position, but it is not in any sense moderate. It's radical. And many of Harris's views are, whether you like them or not. Consider this tape, in which she explains how the federal government should respond to the coronavirus pandemic. Again, whatever you think of affirmative action, it's likely you never imagined affirmative action would be applied to life-saving medical treatment. But Kamala Harris thinks it should be.
The disparities that have long existed based on race are now highlighted. So one of the things I'm calling for around this pandemic is that we make decisions about where the resources should go based on that issue.
So we make decisions about where the resources should go to keep people from dying on the basis of skin color. So only people of a certain color get the vaccine, for example. That's what she's arguing. Now, this is a lot of things. It's immoral. It's unconstitutional, obviously. But above all, it is definitely not moderate. Nor is this, by the way. Here's Harris in the Senate from 2 years ago, telling the acting director of ICE that federal law enforcement officers are a domestic terror group.
The Klan was what we would call today a domestic terrorist group.
Why? Why would we call them domestic terrorist group?
Because they tried to use fear and force to change political environment.
And what was the motivation for the use of fear and force?
It was based on race and ethnicity.
Right. Are you aware of the perception of many about how the power and the discretion at ICE is being used to enforce the laws? And do you see any parallels?
Are you aware of the perception? And do you see any parallels between federal law enforcement officers and the KKK? Harris wanted to know. But not really. The answer, of course, was embedded in the question. Ever notice you act a lot like Hitler? Harris wasn't really asking anything. She was attacking and doing it in the sleaziest, most passive-aggressive possible way. But don't fight back. Don't even think about it, because the only people who criticize Kamala Harris are morally bad people. She's been making that very clear for years. She's even been willing to attack her fellow Democrats. Last fall, as her presidential campaign began to collapse from lack of popular support from voters, Harris suggested the real problem was that the Democratic Party, her party, had too many racists in it.
What I describe and what I believe to be the elephant in the room about my campaign.
What is that?
Electability.
What do you mean?
Electability. You know, essentially, is America ready
for a woman and a woman of color to be president of the United States.
America was ready for a black man to be president of the United States.
And this conversation happened for him. There is a lack of ability or a difficulty in imagining that someone who we have never seen can do a job that has been done, 45 times by someone who is not that person.
Is America ready? Again, it's all pretty amusing. And yes, to answer her question, America is indeed ready for a black president. We elected one twice. But is America ready for a shallow, hectoring rich lady whose only real fans work at hedge funds and MSNBC? That's the real question here. But don't expect anyone in authority to ask it. Instead, expect more lying, more propaganda. We're seeing it everywhere just in the last 24 hours. In November, for example, the New York Times described Kamala Harris as, quote, an uneven campaigner who changes her message and tactics to little effect and has a staff torn into factions. But that's no longer true. You know why? Because it's election season. It's time to take out the orange menace. So the New York Times has revised its view. Harris is now, quote, a political warrior shaped by life in two worlds. And needless to say, she's a pragmatic moderate. The rest of the media vehemently agree with this. In fact, they were so excited about Kamala Harris getting in the race that for a moment, they forgot to scream at their makeup artists.
I thought it was coming, and it was incredibly exciting news when it came.
Just a remarkable moment. She cares about women's issues. She cares about equality deep within her soul.
And she does have a kind of a charisma. I don't want to use the word celebrity, but in political terms, she does.
Really a remarkable rise, as Nia Malika had pointed out there. And as you pointed out, Nia, she is a fighter.
She's smart. She's quick on her feet. She's articulate.
One of the pluses for Kamala Harris' candidacy is her personal magnetism.
This is a phenomenal pick tonight.
People wanted to be around her. There was a charisma, a fascination, for lack of a better word, Anderson, a bit of celebrity surrounding Kamala Harris.
I immediately understood why people in California saw her as the female Obama.
She's remarkable. Really, the question is, if she gives a campaign speech from a position of elevation, is it a Sermon on the Mount? News at 11. The anchors on CNN, of course, were especially supportive. In fact, Kamala Harris is the only politician their boss, the tiny but secretive Jeff Zucker, has ever publicly endorsed. When she ran for Attorney General in the state of California, Zucker said this, quote, Kamala is not just important for the city of San Francisco, the state of California, but for the entire country, end quote. So according to Jeff Zucker, Kamala Harris is that important, existentially important, spiritually important, probably too important to cover as you would a mere politician who just wants to take over your country. So stop asking questions, obey.